Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment. It was supposed to be just another night in late-night television. A celebrity guest, a charming host, a theater full of laughter and applause. But what began as a routine promotional stop turned into one of the most explosive clashes ever broadcast on network TV. The Ed Sullivan Theater buzzed with a familiar hum of excitement. Audience members filed in, clutching their tickets as if they were golden passes to a comedy kingdom. The band rehearsed a few last notes. Producers whispered into headsets, cameras tilted into place, and stagehands rushed to make sure everything looked perfect. The lights, the sound, the crowd's anticipation, all of it pointed to another easy win for Stephen Colbert. And then came the guest, Denzel Washington, Academy Award winner, director, Hollywood royalty. A man whose very presence carried the weight of authority. He walked in with that signature calm grace, flashing his warm smile, shaking hands as the audience roared their approval. For many, this was why they came, to see one of the greatest actors alive, sit across from one of television's sharpest wits. On the surface, it was a perfect pairing. Colbert, the liberal-leaning sadist, known for turning interviews into clever Jew. Denzel, the dignified veteran, respected not only for his craft, but also for his strong faith and moral compass. Two men, two value systems, a collision waiting to happen. But in that moment, no one saw it coming. The crowd expected an hour of banter, jokes, and lighthearted promotion for Denzel's latest film. They didn't realize they were about to witness the unraveling of an interview, the breakdown of a host, and a guest who would ultimately rise from his chair and walk out with dignity intact. The lights dimmed, the familiar theme played, and Colbert stepped onto his stage. His monologue was sharp, polished, filled with political barbs that drew easy laughter. The audience clapped and cheered at every punchline, never guessing that the real fireworks were still to come. This was supposed to be entertainment. Instead, it became a reckoning. What followed would leave Colbert visibly shaken, the audience stunned into silence, and the internet ablaze. The moment that shattered the unspoken rules of late-night television was only minutes away, and you watching this now will have to decide for yourself. Was Colbert right to press, or did Denzel show us what real integrity looks like? Before we get to the clash, make sure you hit subscribe and drop a comment below. Tell us whose side are you on, because after you see what happened, you'll understand why this night is still being talked about as one of the most unforgettable moments in television history. Denzel Washington wasn't there to spar. He wasn't there to debate. He came for one reason: to promote a film. His latest directorial project was already earning critical buzz. A drama about redemption, forgiveness, and second chances, a story close to his heart. The film carried echoes of Denzel's own life philosophy built on faith, discipline, and resilience. For him, the Colbert appearance was just another stop on a demanding promotional tour. Smile, answer a few questions, drop the release date, and move on. But behind the scenes, a different script was taking shape. Sources later revealed that Colbert's writing team had spent the afternoon crafting pointed, even confrontational questions. These weren't about cinematography or performance. They weren't about the artistry of storytelling. No, these were gotcha questions carefully designed to corner Denzel about his Christian faith and his conservative-leaning views. Colbert, energized by his audience's political sensibilities, reportedly told his producers, "Let's challenge him. Let's see if we can get something viral." By the time Denzel's car pulled up outside the theater, the trap was already set. At first, everything seemed normal. The crowd's thunderous applause when he walked on stage, the warm handshake between actor and host, the easy laughter when Colbert teased Denzel about his legendary work ethic. For a few minutes, the exchange felt safe, even friendly. A man talking about his film, an audience nodding along, a host playing his usual role. But then came the shift. "So, Denzel," Colbert began, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "This new film of yours deals with forgiveness and redemption. Given your faith background, I'm curious how much of your personal beliefs influence this story." It was a fair enough question. On the surface, Denzel leaned forward, thoughtful, his voice calm, deliberate. Faith, in whatever form it takes, gives us a framework for forgiveness. The character I'm playing made mistakes, serious ones, but he's trying to find his way back. That to me is universal. The audience murmured approval. It was the kind of grounded, measured response they had come to expect. But Colbert wasn't satisfied. The host leaned in closer. Eyes sharper now.
Right.
But don't you think there's a certain irony when Hollywood actors, people who make a living in a world of fantasy, start lecturing audiences about moral values? The mood shifted. Denzel's smile faltered for just a second. His publicist, watching from the wings, tensed calmly. He replied, I wouldn't call it lecturing. When you're given a platform, you have a responsibility to be authentic about who you are. I don't preach to anyone, but I won't hide my beliefs either. It was a steady answer, but to Colbert it wasn't enough. He pressed harder. But what about the issues your faith community cares about? Marriage equality, women's rights, religion, and government. You've been pretty quiet there, haven't you? The air thickened. The audience shifted in their seats. What started as promotion was turning into interrogation, and still Denzel held steady. His jaw tightened, but his voice didn't waver. My faith teaches me to love, not to judge. I talk about dignity, about hard work, about family. I'm not a politician. I'm an actor telling stories. It was dignified. It was authentic, but it wasn't the viral moment Colbert was hunting for. And so he pushed again. The trap was closing in. What began as a film promotion was quickly spiraling into something else entirely. Core wasn't looking for answers. He was looking for a confrontation. The conversation had already drifted away from film. What began as promotion was tilting into territory that felt sharper, heavier. Colbert leaned forward, resting on his desk, his voice taking on the cadence of a cross-examiner rather than a late-night host. Let's get specific, he said, pausing long enough for the audience to shift uneasily in their seats. You've been very open about your Christian faith. That's fine. But where do you stand on the issues your faith community is always vocal about? Marriage equality, women's reproductive rights, the role of religion and government. Don't you think people deserve clarity? The words landed like an ambush. The theater, which only moments before had been buzzing with laughter, fell quiet. The audience sensed they had crossed into something unscripted. No more playful banter.
This was a challenge.
Denzel Washington didn't flinch. His hands remained steady on the armrest of his chair, his posture upright, but calm. He met Colbert's gaze, his voice measured and deliberate. My faith teaches me to love, Stephen, not to judge. When I talk about values, I'm talking about dignity, about working hard, taking care of your family, respecting people, even when you disagree. I'm not here to dictate laws. I'm not running for office. I'm here as an actor, a director, a man sharing what guides him. It was steady. It was dignified. It was authentic. But it wasn't the answer Colbert was looking for. He leaned closer, pressing harder. The silence itself is a position, isn't it? You can't claim the moral authority of faith while staying neutral on the moral issues of our time. That's having it both ways. A murmur rippled through the audience, half gasp, half shuffle of discomfort. They had expected charm and wit. What they were witnessing felt like a trial. Backstage, Washington's publicist grew visibly tense, one hand already hovering over her phone as if bracing for the fallout. She knew what her client had walked into, and it wasn't what had been promised. Washington's jaw tightened, the first sign of strain beneath the calm exterior, but his voice stayed even. You're asking me to fit my relationship with God into your political categories. That's not what faith is. My responsibility isn't to endorse one side or the other. It's to live authentically and let the work I do on and off-screen speak for itself. For a split second, the room seemed suspended in silence. No applause, no laughter, just the weight of his words. This was the difference between the two men. Colbert was performing confrontation, leaning into provocation to generate a reaction, to craft a viral moment. Washington was embodying authentic dignity, anchored, grounded, refusing to let himself be dragged into political theater. That contrast was now visible to everyone watching. The host's relentless push for spectacle, clashing with the guest's refusal to abandon composure. One man striving to control the narrative, the other standing firm in his truth. But then Colbert pressed one question too far. So you're saying that staying neutral on civil rights issues is actually respecting people? Is that your position? His tone was sharp, almost gleeful, as if daring Washington to slip. And in that instant, the smile that had carried Denzel Washington through decades of Hollywood interviews, premieres, and press junkets vanished. The Hollywood warmth was gone. In its place was steel. The transformation was unmistakable. With a single question, Colbert had crossed a line, and the duel that followed would leave the theater in stunned silence. The air inside the Ed Sullivan Theater felt heavier now, as if every breath carried the weight of what was unfolding. The easy rhythm of late-night television had collapsed. Colbert wasn't smiling anymore. His voice, sharp and insistent, cut through the silence. Come on, Denzel. You can't have it both ways. You can't sit here and talk about faith, values, redemption, and then dodge the issues that actually matter. Isn't that avoiding moral responsibility? It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. For the first time that evening, Washington shifted in his chair, but not out of discomfort, out of resolve, his eyes locked on core, calm, but edged with steel. Are you interviewing me about my film, Stephen, or are you trying to score points? The line landed like a thunderclap. A nervous laugh rippled through the crowd, the kind of sound an audience makes when they're not sure if it's safe to react. Some clapped hesitantly, others froze in their seats. The power dynamic had shifted for a moment. The host looked caught off guard, but Colbert doubled down, his tone almost defensive. I'm trying to have an honest conversation. You've got influence, a platform. When you invoke faith, you step into the public square. And silence on issues like equality or women's rights. That's not neutrality. That's complicity. The word hung in the air.
Complicity.
It stung. It provoked. It framed Washington not as a guest, but as a defendant. Washington leaned forward now, his voice lower but carrying further. Complicity is forcing people into boxes so you can score a headline. My work speaks for itself.
My values speak for themselves.
I don't need to be a pawn in your political theater. Applause broke out, scattered, hesitant, but real enough to show that at least some in the crowd felt the imbalance of what was happening. Colbert's composure slipped another inch. He gestured with his cards, his words tumbling faster, more heated. You can't come on a national stage, talk about redemption and second chances, and not be asked what that means in real life.
This isn't a puff piece, Denzel.
This is accountability. Washington's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady, measured. Accountability isn't ambushing a guest under false pretenses. It isn't twisting faith into a weapon. Accountability is respect, even when you disagree. The line drew another wave of applause, sharper this time. Colbert tried to speak over it, but the sound of the crowd forced him to pause. The moment belonged to Washington, and that was the danger of the tactic. Colbert was leaning on what media critics call host cornering. It's the strategy of trapping a guest into a yes or no position, boxing them into a corner where any answer can be spun as a weakness. Sometimes it creates viral fireworks, but it comes with risk. When the guest doesn't play along, the host can end up looking less like a truth teller and more like a bully. That risk was now on full display. Colbert's tone sharpened, but his rhythm faltered. Washington's calm was unshaken. His refusal to take the bait, only making the host push harder, faster, more recklessly. You can't expect to sit here, present yourself as a moral voice, and then stay silent on the biggest issues of our time, Colbert pressed, almost pleading. Now, Washington's answer cut clean. I don't present myself as a moral voice, Stephen. I'm not running for office. I'm not writing policy. I'm an actor, a director, a man of faith. What I share is my experience, not your political script. The theater erupted in scattered claps, others still frozen in silence, watching the confrontation unfold like a duel. The rhythm of television setups, punchlines, applause breaks had completely broken down. This wasn't late-night comedy anymore. It was combat. Backstage, Washington's publicist had moved to the very edge of the wings, her face tense, ready to step in if the moment spiraled beyond repair. In the control room, producers exchanged frantic looks. This wasn't what they had planned, but no one dared call for a cut. On stage, two men stared each other down, one grasping for control, the other anchored in calm defiance. The audience wasn't laughing anymore. They weren't clapping on cue. They were watching something raw, unfiltered, not an interview, a duel. The tension had stretched as far as it could go. The room was already tight with silence, the air heavy enough to cut. Then Colbert, frustrated and cornered by Washington's calm defiance, let slip the word that would push everything over the edge. "You're being a coward, Denzel." Gasps rippled through the audience. A word too sharp, too loaded, too personal. It wasn't just a question anymore. It was an insult on live television. Washington's eyes narrowed, the calm mask finally hardening into something sharper. He leaned forward, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Cowardice," he said slowly. "Each syllable deliberate is hiding behind comedy when what you really want to do is attack someone." The words landed like a strike. The crowd froze, caught between awe and disbelief. They had come for late-night laughs. Instead, they were watching a heavyweight showdown where every line felt like a blow. Colbert shifted in his chair, his hands restless with his cards. He tried to smile, but the grin looked forced, brittle. He was losing control, and everyone could see it. Then Washington delivered the line that turned the room ice cold. "Do not throw pearls before swine." The biblical phrase hit like a slap across the face of the broadcast itself. Sharp, unflinching, and devastating in its simplicity. The theater erupted into a stunned hush. No one dared laugh. No one clapped. Even the band, usually quick with a fill to break tension, sat motionless. Colbert blinked, visibly rattled. For the first time in the night, the host had no comeback, no clever retort, no punchline to soften the blow. Both men stood. Core, out of desperation. Washington, out of resolve. Their bodies squared, the cameras catching every angle of the duel. The audience leaned forward in their seats, not breathing, realizing they were witnessing something they might never see again. A late-night show imploding live, stripped of its artifice. Washington didn't shout. He didn't grandstand. His voice was steady, carrying the gravity of someone who knew exactly what he wanted to say and how he wanted to leave. He turned not to Colbert, but to the camera. "To the millions watching at home, I came here tonight to share a film I believe in. A story about redemption, forgiveness, and hope. To everyone watching, I apologize that it turned into something else. That's not on me. That's not who I am. If you want to see the work, if you want to be inspired, the film opens this Friday. I hope you go and find something in it for yourself."
It was direct.
It was graceful. It was devastating. In a single moment, he not only salvaged his purpose for being there, he also exposed how far the host had fallen. Colbert, still standing, looked frozen, caught between anger and embarrassment. His face tightened, his hands twitched, as if he might try one more line to save the moment. But nothing came. Nothing could. The audience sat in stunned silence. Then a scattered wave of applause began, hesitant at first, then building louder and louder. Not for Colbert, for Washington. The cameras caught every second. A host stripped of control. A guest walking away with dignity intact. Washington stepped back from the chair, gave a short nod to the crowd, and walked toward the wings. The applause followed him, rising into a thunder that shook the studio. The band still didn't play. The laughter never returned. Colbert remained at his desk, cards trembling slightly in his hand, staring into a crowd that no longer looked amused. He had lost his grip, his guest, and his audience, all in the span of minutes. In that moment, Colbert didn't just lose a guest. He lost control of his own show, and the world was watching. The silence after Washington's exit line lingered like smoke. For a moment, it seemed no one in the building knew what to do next. Colbert stood frozen behind his desk, shuffling his cards and nervous bursts, eyes darting toward the wings where Washington had just disappeared. The confidence, the practiced wit, the polished timing gone. He looked less like a host and more like a man who had lost the ground beneath his feet. Behind the cameras, producers waved their arms and frantic signals. The control room crackled with voices shouting over each other.
Cut to commercial.
Stay on him. What do we do? A show built on tight precision had descended into chaos in seconds. Colbert tried to recover, forcing a smile that came off as brittle, almost desperate. Well, he muttered, voice thin. That was something. A few nervous chuckles escaped from the crowd, but the tension in the theater refused to lift. And then Washington, still within earshot, turned back one last time. His words cut sharper than any punchline. This is not journalism, he said evenly, staring directly at the host. It's a hit job with better lighting. The line landed like a hammer. The audience gasped, then fell into a silence, so heavy it felt suffocating. No band sting, no laugh track, just the raw weight of a truth no one could spin. Washington walked off stage, his footsteps echoing in the hushed theater. The crowd watched him go, not cheering, not booing, just breathing in a stunned quiet. A collective sigh as if they knew they had just seen something both historic and uncomfortable. Colbert sank back into his chair, his face pale, his posture slumped. He shuffled his cards again, searching for a lifeline that wasn't there. His producers shouted into his earpiece, urging him to pivot, to salvage, to move on. But nothing worked. The unspoken contract that held host, guest, and audience together had been shattered. That contract is simple. The guest plays along, the host flatters with humor, and the audience gets to laugh safely from their seats. But when the guest refuses the script, when dignity collides with performance, the contract crumbles, and once it breaks, the audience can no longer pretend they are watching entertainment. They are witnessing conflict. That's what made this moment so catastrophic. It wasn't just that Colbert lost control of his show. It was that the illusion itself, the smooth veneer of comedy as comfort, was stripped away in real time. Washington exited with dignity. Colbert sat with cards trembling in his hand. The audience caught in between, left with the uneasy feeling that they had seen something they were never meant to see. But the drama didn't end with the walkout. It was only beginning, because the real battle was about to erupt outside the studio walls. The fallout was immediate. Within minutes of Washington's walkout, clips from the broadcast exploded across social media. The hashtag #Denzel walks out surged to the top of global trends. Millions watched the 30-con confrontation on their phones before the show had even finished airing. The internet was merciless. Memes flooded Twitter and TikTok, framing Washington as a stoic truth-teller and Colbert as a desperate provocator. Headlines followed within hours. Washington walks. Colbert crumbles, and faith versus fury. Late night's most explosive clash. By morning, the consequences were measurable. Overnight ratings for Colbert showed a sharp drop, the steepest decline since his debut. Advertisers called the network nervous about the optics of being associated with a segment branded online as a hit job. Critics in major newspapers went further, accusing Colbert of crossing the line from satire into ambush. And Washington. He said almost nothing. Outside a Manhattan hotel, a reporter shouted a question about the controversy. Washington offered only a calm, measured response. "I wish Mr. Colbert well." That was it. No rant, no escalation, no victory lap, just dignity. The contrast was striking. On one side, a host unraveling under pressure, his judgment and ethics questioned. On the other, a guest who walked away with his image not only intact but elevated. The price of outrage was clear. For Colbert, it was credibility and control. For Washington, it was a moment of clarity, a reminder that sometimes the strongest statement is silence. But silence can be louder than words, and the world had already drawn its judgment. The walkout quickly became more than a headline. It became a case study. Media schools dissected it. Commentators debated it. Audiences remembered it as the late-night comedy collided with hard truth. In the final reckoning, two images remained. Core visibly shaken, fumbling to recover as the illusion of control slipped through his hands and Washington leaving the stage with composure, turning a hostile ambush into a masterclass in restraint. The lessons were unavoidable. In the world of talk shows, confrontation can spark ratings, but without respect, it destroys trust. Hosts may chase viral moments, but guests who embody authenticity always walk away with the audience's respect. Washington didn't need to shout, didn't need to win a debate. He simply refused to surrender his dignity, and in doing so, he reminded viewers of a truth bigger than any headline. Real power lies not in spectacle, but in self-control. The verdict was written not by critics, but by the silence of that studio and the roar of the internet afterward. One man left with integrity. The other was left alone on his stage.